This is part 3, and hopefully the last part, of building the About section. So this is what we want to build. So we have these 3 images here, and when we hover one, it comes to the top and it will have this grey-like border around it, okay? And also, when we hover one, the other ones become smaller. So you see, this one grows and the other ones become smaller, right? You see that? Okay, so let's now do that. And we start with the HTML again. And so let me show you some more Emmet magic, okay? So we're gonna start with a div called composition, because that's what our component is going to be called. So composition. And now right from this Emmet abbreviation, I can actually continue writing it like this. So now I'm defining the children of this composition class. So what I want right now is to have an image with the class composition photo. So remember the BEM methodology. So this is the block and this is the element, and we have to repeat the name of the block in the class name for the element. So again, this is the element inside of the block. Now these 3 images that we're going to put here, they are completely different. So let me show you again. They are, for example, at different positions. And so we need for each of them also a modifier. Remember, so BEM stands for block, element, modifier. So we have the block, the element, and now let's also add a modifier. And so we add a second class. And in Emmet, in order to do that, we just use a second dot. So composition photo again. And then remember for the modifier, just dash dash, and then P1, which stands for photo or for picture 1, okay? All right, and now we want it 3 times. So we can just put parentheses around here, times 3, and now hit tab. All right, and here we go. So we have our div with the composition and then the 3 images with the composition photo class, the composition photo P1, and then we just have to change 2 and 3 here. But for now, let's just fill out these image sources here, okay? So img, and then this one is called net1, and actually not that one, so JPEG, okay? So now the alt, let's simply call it photo1 and not make a big deal out of this alt. And all I did now was to hit tab and it went to this next source definition here. So img net, and as you can guess, this one is going to be called the number 2. I hit tab again and it goes right to the next place where I want to write some text. So this is really smart, really intelligent. It knows what I want to do. I hit tab again, and this is the next place where I want to write some code, of course. And now the number 3. And now photo 3. And now let me just change this here, so 2 and 3. And that's our markup. So 3 images with 3 alt texts. They all share the same element class. Then each of them will have a different modifier because each of them is a bit different. Okay, and now let's create a new file in here in the components and call it composition.scss. And then don't forget to edit here in the main file. Otherwise, you may forget it a bit later. So import components/composition. And here we go. So save and close. And here we go. So what styles do we want for the composition? Well, actually not much, at least not for now. So let's continue with nesting further down. So photo. So these are our elements. So composition photo. And actually, let's now take a look at how they look like without any styling. And so you see that it simply puts them one after the other here down here. Well, actually, I see these are very low quality pictures, and that's not the one that I want to use right now. So let's just charge this here to large. I think I remember there was like a large version of these. Let me check it. Large and large. Yeah, that's much better. So these are the high quality images that we want. And we're going to talk about responsive images a bit later, where we then can change this according to screen size and resolution, but let's leave that for later. So anyway, what we want to do now is to actually style these photos. And so let's start with the width. and set it to 55%. Then we want them to have a box shadow as well. 0 in the X, and usually this is always 0, at least almost always I would say. Then 15 pixels here, and now some nice big blur of 40 pixels, so 4 rem. And the color black with, let's say, 40% opacity. Okay, we want to give them a little border radius as well. That should look nice and clean and modern. And so let's take a look at how they are looking right now. So already looking close to what we have in our original, but we want them to be on top of one another. And so how do we actually do that? Do you have an idea? Well, I would say that the best way to do it is to use absolute positioning. Okay, so let's do that. So position absolute. And remember that as soon as we set the position to absolute on an element, these elements will be placed according to a reference. And the reference is the first parent that it encounters which has its position set to something. Now, since we want this reference to be the composition, so we want it to be positioned according to this composition element, of course, we set this one to position relative. Okay. And so now this has position relative. And so the reference, the 0, 0 coordinate, will be on the top left corner of this composition element, right? So let's now place these images in different places. And the way we can do that is to select them one by one. And that's why we have these modifier classes, right? So P1, and then the same for the others. Well, let's copy it later actually. So we just have to define a left and a top now. So let's say left of 0 and the top of, well, I could do 0, but let's make it actually -2 rem. And so this will move it upwards. Okay, so let me just show you how it's going to look like. So this is the one. And I did it so that this image here actually is a bit on top of this text, so it's not in the same line. This would maybe look a bit strange. So now it's a bit up higher than this line of the text. So this one here is at 0, -2, and the other ones are at 0, 0, which remember is this top left corner of the composition element, which is this one here behind all of this. Okay, let's now take a look at how we have it here. Okay, so this one, then this one, and then this one. So let me copy this. And you know why this actually works, right? So composition, then photo, then P1, P2, and P3. So this helps us basically compose these class names that we have here, like composition, photo, P1, P2, P3. So let's put this one here to the right side, 0. And so what this will do is that it will start at the right side. So moving 0 pixels from the right side of the container. And then the top, let's put it 20 pixels from the top. Okay, let's check it out again. And all right, so that is the second one. So let's not change the third one as well. And I will put it even further down, so 10 rem. And then from the left, let's put it actually in a percentage value here. So why not? So 20% from the left. And so here we are. So this is how this looks like. Of course, once again, I encourage you to play around with these numbers. I already knew the way that I wanted to place this, and so I knew how I wanted the numbers to look like. But you, of course, can experiment with them and change them, right? Okay, and now we're ready to implement the hover effect that we saw here on the page. So again, it creates this green border and it zooms in on this image and zooms out on the remaining images as soon as we hover over one of them, okay? So let's now implement that. Now just one word about why we used all these percentages here, okay? It's because of something that I talked about a couple of lectures ago, which are one of these ingredients of responsive web design. So one of them is flexible images. And so we always have to define the width of images in percentages if possible, because this way it will nicely scale with the viewport. And the same thing here applies with the left distance that I wanted here. It's also in percentages. Let me just very quickly show it to you. Without even any media queries here already, we see that this adapts nicely to the page. Well, actually this is not, sorry, this is the original version, of course. So you see that it decreases and it's not overlapping the text. So of course it's missing the media queries to make it look better on other screen sizes, but it's more than enough for now. What matters is that we already defined it in percentages to start with. Okay, but let's now implement the hover effect, okay? So hover, and what we want to happen is of course the zooming. So transform, scale, and I will scale it to 1.05. So not a big difference, just like a subtle difference, but still clearly visible. Then the box shadow is also going to change, because if it's now bigger, it should give the impression that it's closer up to the user, and so it should cast a bigger shadow. And so let's increase that shadow, okay? So bigger shadow and also a bit darker. And now the third thing was that it overlaps all of the other images. And so how do we do that? How do we say that if we have 3 images, we want one of them to be on top of all the others? Well, we use the z-index, right? And so let's set a z-index on all of the regular images. So z-index, and let's simply put something like 10. It's not really important. Then here we set one that is higher. So z-index 20, for example, okay? And so now this one will always have the highest z-index, and therefore it should be displayed on top. And now just for the animation effect, a transition of all the properties in 0.2 seconds. All right, let's take a look. And yeah, so what we just implemented actually works just fine. Now let's take care of that green border stuff. Now you see that there's a space between the border and the images, right? It's not just a border, and that's actually not so easy to implement, at least not with the CSS properties that everyone knows. And that's what I'm going to show you, some lesser known CSS properties. So first up, we set the outline property here in the hover state. So outline, and let's say we want 15 pixels, so 1.5 rem. Then we stated solid, and then the color. So our green color. And this is similar to setting it to a border. So if we had border, then it would look, for now, it would look the same. So this is it. It would look like this. But with the outline, we can do something that we cannot with the border. And that is the outline offset. So outline offset. And we can say we want 20 pixels here. So 2 rem. And then it will give us this space between the border, or we should actually call it the outline, and the element on which the outline is applied. And this is it. It actually also zooms in a bit like the image. And so this is the effect that we have. Well, not exactly, because what's missing here now is that the other images decrease in size. So let's do that final thing as well. And do you have any idea how we could actually pull this off? How we could implement this thing? It's not really easy, but it's actually just a one-line selector. So what should this selector look like? Maybe take a second and try to think about what happens and how we could write down the selector for this, okay? So I want you to pause the video and think about it. And if you don't come up with a good solution, it's no problem at all. But what I want you to do here is to think, okay? Thinking is really important, because CSS is not just some stupid or dull language. You also have to think and come up with solutions for these different stuff that you want to do. So let's try that. All right, did you manage to do it? Again, if not, no worries, it's absolutely no problem. It's not really expected at this point, because again, this is rather complex. Now, this is how we do it. So, hover on the composition actually. So, we start with the hover state on the entire composition. So as soon as we hover the composition element, then select the photo that's nested inside of it, and then select the one that is not hovered. And It's as simple as that. Okay, does that make sense? Let me actually write this out for you here outside as a comment, just to make it a bit more visible. So composition. So this is what this looks like. So when we hover the composition, then select the composition photo, which is not hovered. So this maybe looks a bit crazy, but it works. And let me show it and prove it to you. Transform, scale, and let's scale it down just a little bit, or maybe 0.9, so we can see it better. And yep, so it works. So notice that it happens as soon as we enter any of these elements. And so the other ones are not hovered, and so they shrink exactly like we determined. And 9 is actually a bit too much, so let's set it to 95 again. Reload, and that's the effect we were looking for, right? Let's compare it. Yep. Actually, this one is a bit more complete, and that's because we just left out one single small thing, because in here we not only scale it, but we can also translate it a bit in the Y direction, so we can move it up a little bit. So we'll just move it up by 5 pixels, and it will make the animation look even a bit cooler, okay? Yeah, you see how it gets bigger and it also comes up a bit? That's it. All right, really cool. And again, you could do all kinds of crazy stuff here. You could rotate the elements and whatever you wanted, of course, transform all of the stuff. But that's not what we're looking for here. What we wanted to do is this section, and it's not done. It looks like the one in our original version. It has slightly different text, but that's not a problem. And so we hit our goal for these couple of lectures, all right? So I hope that you're enjoying the course. If you are, I would appreciate some feedback, of course. That's always 100% welcomed. No matter if it's good feedback or not so good, maybe you have something to improve in the course. Just let me know. Write me a message, an email, anything. Just let me know what you think of the course, okay? Anyway, see you soon in the next lecture.